Hey everybody, and welcome once again to Time Out with Kevin Gallagher. This is part 2, or maybe part 1, however you want to look at it. Last time that we visited with Jonathan Gray, we did a whole introduction on this subject, which is all about the stars, about not the horoscopes, but about the zodiac. And there's a big difference. We got into that last week. And this week, we are going to sit down and take a look at what I found out from reading his wonderful book, and you saw a screenshot of it there about Virgo, is that Virgo is where we start in this, in the star signs, see, and there I go, Jonathan, I did it again, saying the horoscope, and it's not the horoscope, it's the zodiac. So, Jonathan Gray, on the phone all the way from New Zealand. I want to thank you once again for being on the program, and just reintroduce yourself a little bit for the people at home, and let's get right into the subject matter, shall we?
Thank you, Kevin. I've been in archaeology for over 40 years and led or accompanied more than 25 expeditions. We've been working in quite a number of countries, and in recent years, more importantly, in the biblical lands of Egypt, Israel, and Turkey. And now we're talking about the zodiac. My earlier study revolved around the ancient civilizations and their technology and their knowledge and their accurate mapping of the planet. But they didn't just map our Earth. They also mapped the sky as it appears from the Earth. And across the star map, they placed hieroglyphic pictures which told a prophetic story. Mm-hmm. And this dates back to about 4000 BC. But what is more astonishing is the zodiac message is handled exactly on the star maps as we find it in the Bible, even in the precise order, starting with the seed of Virgo in Genesis, the seed of the Virgin, of the woman, to the triumphant Leo, the Lion of Judah in Revelation. And the names and the symbols of the one answer exactly to the other.
Wow.
Now, you might wonder, is that accidental? No, hardly. The evidence is clear that one is of the same fabric with the other. And it's hard to avoid the conclusion that both are from the same eternal spirit that's moved to show us things to come. And surprising as it may be, in both the star signs of the zodiac and in the Bible are marked out the same pivot events of history, stage by stage, until the end of time. That, to me, is very fascinating.
Yeah, that's really...
Another important fact to note is that we start with Virgo. That's important.
Okay, why is it important that we start with Virgo?
Because the beginning of the story has to be pinpointed, as well as the end. Otherwise, we won't know how it all begins. Mm-hmm. Now, in the zodiac of the Temple of Esna in Egypt, now this zodiac has all these same star signs on it, but it also contains something extra, and that is an image of a sphinx, a picture of a sphinx with the head of a woman and the body of a lion. And this sphinx is actually, on this star chart, placed between the signs of Virgo and Leo, as to tell us that it is the linking point, the beginning and the end of the story in the circle. Now, interesting also, the word sphinx means to bind closely together.
Really?
And this suggests that it was designed to indicate where the two ends of the zodiac were to be joined together and where the circle begins and ends.
Wow.
And in harmony with this, there's a star in the constellation Leo, which is called Sarkam, which means the joining. So the sphinx tells us to begin with Virgo and to end with Leo. And according to the best authorities, the custom was worldwide among the ancients to start with Virgo and then go round the circle to end with Leo. So there we've got the ancient testimony of where we should begin.
Let me stop you for 1 second, because what I'm thinking here, and I know that the zodiac and the horoscopes are two completely different things, but so why does the zodiac that you're saying start with Virgo, but yet when I open up a newspaper, or somebody opens up a newspaper and they look at the horoscopes, it usually starts with Aries?
Yes, that's because they're going by where the year began in Babylon when the horoscope was invented.
Huh, okay. That makes sense now. I was wondering about that. That's very interesting. Continue, please.
Now, we start with Virgo. And Virgo really is not about a woman, but about her promised seed. We've got a woman here, specifically a virgin. Now, we might ask the question, why isn't she simply called woman? Why is she called Virgo, the virgin? Unless there was some special reason for making this woman into a virgin, why bother to call her a virgin, especially if she's got a child? That's a very interesting question. So we've got a woman here, but specifically a virgin, and in Arabic, she's called Adora, which means the pure virgin. In Greek, she's called Parthenos, which means the maid of virgin pureness. And in all the different languages, she was given a different name according to their language, but it always represented a pure virgin. So the ancient traditions emphasize the virginity of this woman. But that's not all. The greater wonder is that motherhood attends the virgin. Most unusual thing if we were just guessing to put something up on a star map.
Yeah.
So there must have been a message that they were trying to convey. What was this woman who was a virgin giving birth to a child? Now, in the earliest representations of the star maps, for example in Babylon, Egypt, and so on, she holds the child in her arms. In fact, even Shakespeare refers to this good boy in Virgo's lap. So Shakespeare knew his star map. And in her hand is the brightest star in the constellation, and it has a name which is Speaker. That's a Latin name today, which means the seed of corn. But the original Hebrew names for this star were Zerah and Semak, which meant seed and branch. So Virgo is the holder and the bringer of an illustrious seed. And he is actually contemplated as far greater than her, as we'll see in a moment, by one of the side pieces, which makes that very, very evident. And by the way, it's the seed that is the focus of attention here, not the woman. And this child is the seed.
And that's because he's up higher than her in all the images, usually.
That is right. In the side piece coma, he's explained as being the more important one of the two.
Wow. Continue, please.
So the emphasis is clearly upon the offspring, not upon herself.
Wow.
And the Coptic name, Egyptian name, Espolia, for Virgo, means the place of the desired branch. In other words, she is simply the pedestal or the receptacle for the child who is more important. Now, when we look at the names in this constellation, they reinforce this message. There's Al-Zimak, there's Al-Azar, and Subalon, three of the star names in the constellation, which mean the shoot, the branch, the ear of wheat. And one of the stars in the arm actually is called Al-Mudaron, which means who shall come down. And an alternate translation is who shall have dominion. And this star is also known as Vindimiatrix, which is a Chaldean word meaning the son who cometh, or the branch who is coming.
Wow.
So it's a child who is coming down, and she is the receptacle for this child. That's the message of Virgo.
Wow.
And of course that gels with the biblical prophecies. The book of Isaiah speaks of the virgin conceiving, bearing a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel, that is God with us.
Right.
And this is the same promised seed in the book of Genesis of the woman who's predicted to assume human flesh and deliver mankind. So it might startle those who've never thought of it before, but the symbols in the star maps and the symbols in the Bible are identical. In the Gospel of John, he's called the corn, or the seed of wheat, exactly as in Virgo. In Isaiah and Jeremiah and Zechariah in the Old Testament, he's called the branch of righteousness, and my servant the branch.
Right.
And then there's another star here called Zavrija, which means gloriously beautiful. And that reminds us of what Isaiah's prophecy says, that in that day shall the branch of the Lord be beautiful and glorious. And so the identification is unmistakable here. We've got a virgin awaiting her promised son, and then we get the three deacons, or the three side piece constellations or signs, which bear out the same message and give us more detail.
Wow. That's really amazing.
The son that's to be honored, not the mother.
Not the mother. What's more the depth of this sign that you can get into?
Well, you know, there are people today in the Christian world who are under the illusion that we've got to go through a woman to get to Christ because he's hard-hearted and he needs a soft woman's approach. And so Mary comes into the picture as the virgin that we must honour and cherish rather than the son. And that today is in the minds of millions of people, unfortunately. But the star signs and the scripture tell us it's the son, not the mother, who is to be honoured and worshipped.
Yeah, you know, that's fascinating. And the one thing that I've always found from reading your book, what's really jumped out at me is the actual names of the stars and how they actually relate into the story itself that's being told. Because I can remember thinking even as a kid, and I've had, you know, discussions with this, and it's like, you know, I got a Bible here in front of me, and it's like, here's the written word right here, you know, Holy Bible, the written word. But you go back 5,000 years ago, or 5,500 years ago, 6,000 years ago, how did they know that, you know, any of this that we have written down now, that in this you know, is a collection of different writings that came about over, you know, many hundreds and hundreds of years. And what you're talking about tonight is what answers that question. This is how they knew from the time of Adam until we got this, what was going to be going down, correct?
Yes, they did. Long before the Bible was written down, God had his first book in the sky, and every night the great picture was shown to people all around the world, and it moved progressively round, and they knew about the desired child that they were longing for.
Right. So
now,
go ahead, continue.
Yes, we have the three other pictures around Virgo. The first one being Coma, the nation's desired child, and Coma in the Hebrew and in the Oriental dialect means the desired, the longed for. Now, here's something very interesting. The Arabian astronomer Albanese, a non-Christian, this is how he describes this sign, Coma, next to Virgo. He says, there arises in the first decan, as the Persians, Chaldeans, and Egyptians, and the two Hermes and Asclepius teach, a young woman whose Persian name denotes a pure virgin, sitting on a throne, nourishing an infant boy, said boy having a Hebrew name, by some nations called Yesu, with the signification of Hisa, which in Greek is called Christ.
Wow.
Here is a non-Christian quoting all of the other nations of the world that the name of the child is called Christ, that the Yesu is a form of Jesus,
right,
or Yeshua, as we know.
Yeshua. And what's interesting is that the word Christ, or it goes back to words that mean anointed one.
That is right, yes. And so clearly this woman in Virgo and the woman in the side piece of Virgo are the same woman, but there's an explanation going deeper into the story. And the infant, the seed, and the branch are the same person. And in Coma, the head of the son is slightly higher than the head of the mother. Now, hieroglyphically, this means that he is to be the greater one.
Right.
And as in the zodiac, he's the desired, so he's described in the Bible as the desire of all nations. The book of Haggai tells us that.
Yep.
I tell you, Kevin, when I first discovered this, it really rocked me.
Yeah,
in the zodiac prophecy as early as 4000 BC, we have a virgin longing for the birth of her son, a greater one who is desired or expected by all nations, but the greatest shock of all, he has a Hebrew name, and that name is Yeshua, Jesus.
That's really amazing. How did you feel when you first learned that? from doing your research? I mean, you said it blew you away, but how did it really make you feel?
Oh, boy. First of all, I wondered how for so long I had not known this and missed it, for a start. And secondly, it's like a sledgehammer. It reinforced into my brain beyond any doubt that Jesus Christ was the predicted one, and there was no other in the planet that was being predicted. He was the one.
Yeah, and so this is how, to go back to what I was saying earlier, this is how people like Abraham and such, this is how they knew what the promise was. And there's even that famous section with Abraham where God tells him, just go and try to number the stars. This is how your seed shall be. So, you know, God's using that illustration of all these stars. You know, we can see it all throughout God's Word.
Yes, and when you talk about where Abraham was told to go off and roll off the stars because that's how his seed would be, Paul says that seed is singular, not plural. It's a different occasion from when he was told that his descendants would number like the stars. These were two separate occasions in Genesis where Abraham had to go out and look at the stars. And this particular one was, so shall your seed be, Paul says was a singular word in the Hebrew. Christ, the seed.
The seed.
And Paul also says that God preached the gospel to Abraham, and this is how he did it.
That's really amazing. Continue, please, with more about Virgo. Right.
Okay. Now, we've got Virgo, the woman's promised seed. We've got Coma, the nation's desired child. Then we've got Centaurus, which is a dual-natured man in humiliation. And this is pictured this way. We've got an animal, a sacrificial animal, either a ram or a calf, according to the Egyptian zodiac, which were sacrificial animals in the Bible. He's a sacrificial animal, but he's also a man. In other words, he's a human being that the animal sacrifices represented prophetically. And he's a double-natured being, by man repulsive, and yet great and powerful and beneficent, pushing with his lance at the head of a victim. That's what it shows on the star maps. Now, he is positioned directly above the Southern Cross, which speaks to us of his death on the cross. Now, at the time of Christ, the Southern Cross began to go below the horizon. It can be seen today from where we are here in the Southern Hemisphere, but no longer visible in the Northern Hemisphere. But Centaurus was anciently called Bezer, that's by Arabic, Chaldean and Hebrew, which means the despised one. And there's another star sign, called a star name in him called Asmith, which in the Hebrew means sin offering. And another one's called Nemu, which in the Egyptian means appointed to die. So there was agreement among them all. And the brightest star seen in the foreleg of this star sign is Ptolemy, which means the heretofore and the hereafter. In other words, the one who has been before and the one who will be hereafter. The Omega and the Alpha and Omega, or the beginning and the end, the eternal one.
Now, is there any... continue.
Go ahead.
Continue.
There's also a star in it called Chiron, which means the pierced, and another star, Pholus, which means the mediator. So here we've got a picture of an eternal being with a dual nature. Now, what is the dual nature of the Messiah? It's God and man in one person. And he's despised by man. That reminds us of Isaiah 53 prophecy. He's an offering for sin, and he is pierced, as in crucifixion.
Interesting.
And the appointed one was to offer himself as a sacrifice and be a mediator between the two parties, God and man. That's a huge story, all told with the symbolism of the star names.
That's really amazing that you've just gone on for about 5 minutes, and throughout this program, we're just talking about the one star sign, folks, of Virgo, and all these stars that comprise that constellation. And we've gotten all of that information that you're relaying to us just by the star names and the constellation itself. I mean, that's really amazing.
Oh, yes. It's mind-blowing. Then the third side piece to Virgo, the third constellation or decan, is Bootes. which means the exalted shepherd and harvester. It also, in the Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, means the coming one. He's also called Arctophylax, which means the guardian of the flock.
Right.
And if you look at the star names, it's the Piest, who bruises, the preserver, the branch, the rod. And he's got a sickle as a harvester, just as Jesus is portrayed as a shepherd of his people. And finally, he turns with the sickle in his hand in the book of Revelation, and he separates the sheep from the goats. The harvest time has arrived at the end.
It's amazing.
That's the message of Booties.
Now, is there any significance to the stars themselves as far as how bright they are and to some of these meanings that we're talking about? Like the brightness of one star compared to another?
Well, in the star sign in particular of Coma, the bright star speaks of him as being the seed. Now, I haven't gone through the brightness of all of them, but certainly that's significant. It means that the most important feature of Coma is that it's the boy himself, and he is the promised seed.
It's amazing. Continue, please.
Well, that winds up there for a moment what the symbolism for those is. But now we go to before the birth of Jesus, there were things happening in the sky that led, first of all, the wise men to come, and then there were others who were looking at the stars and seeing things happening. And perhaps I can just list half a dozen of these. How much time do we have?
We have about 5 minutes, so
okay, we can do it.
Go right ahead.
It's an astronomical fact that in 7 BC there was a conjunction of 3 planets, Jupiter, or 2 planets to start with. Jupiter and Saturn appeared together in the sign of Pisces. Now, both Jewish and Gentile historians agreed that such a conjunction would signify the birth of a lordly and illustrious person among the Hebrews. Now, that's interesting. Even the Encyclopedia Britannica refers to this as a sign of Messiah's coming. Now, Jupiter was always regarded as the planet associated with kings, and Saturn was identified always with the Jews.
Okay.
And the sign of Pisces was always a sign of the people of God who were following the Lord. Now, that's a conjunction of a great person who's going to be king appearing in the land of the Hebrews. Now, it's also an astronomical fact that there occurred 3 successive conjunctions of these same planets in one and the same year, indicating he'd be triply illustrious, and these were also in that same sign of Pisces. And then the following February, Mars moved into configuration to form a triangle with the other 2 planets. Mars always represented fighting, war. So let's look at the symbolism here very quickly. The Lord our righteousness coming to Israel to combat the foe. In other words, Jesus Christ, the Messiah, was coming to fight Satan's control over his people.
That's really that's
in March
incredible.
5 BC and April 4 BC, an unusual star appeared first in Capricornus, the sign of the sacrifice, and then in Aquila, the sign of the enemy of the serpent, which we will deal with more later. But these all suggested to probably the wise men, before they saw the actual star that led them to Bethlehem, that there was a signified message here, that the Messiah was about to be born.
It's incredible. We got a few minutes left, so can you give us a hint about what we'll talk about in the next segment with the next star sign, and which one is that star sign?
Oh, yeah, sure. Be happy to do that. In our next program, we'll get into the second main star sign, which is Libra.
Okay.
And Libra has 3 others co-joined with it. And the message of Libra, we're going to find out, is a weighing in the balances. And that happens to represent, according to Scripture, the fact that we have sinned, we're weighed in the balances, we're found guilty, and we need someone to rescue us from it. And we'll find some very, very interesting symbolism there.
Wow. Anything you want to add before we get off the air about Virgo, the one that we've looked at this week, a conclusion to the whole matter?
Okay, yes. Actually, over Bethlehem, 9 months before the birth of Jesus, it's an astronomical fact that Virgo actually was coming up over the horizon. And at the time of his birth, the sun stood in Virgo. Now, that is very interesting. So I think that's very significant.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Wasn't there also something with the stars and where, and maybe this is what I'm thinking of, is what you're talking about, but the way the stars were aligned when he was born and versus now, because now where the feet are?
Yes. Well, at the time when he was born, not precisely what you're saying, but at the time when he was born, we have coma, the special sign of the woman's infant seed, just rising over the eastern horizon, and while the sun was in the main one, appearing in the Virgo.
Right.
Now we also have the fact that the Jewish people knew the time was due. We've got Jewish writings stating that fact.
Right.
And they had a prophecy that a star would appear in Jacob. Now Jacob represented, of course, the people of Israel.
Yeah, I got 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
We start off with Virgo. We're going to end with Leo. We've got Genesis going through to Revelation. So the book of the sky from Genesis to Revelation is identical to the book we read in the Bible.
Right. It's incredible. It really is. It's really amazing. Jonathan Gray, we'll have to pick this up next week. We'll talk some more about this fascinating, fascinating stuff. And it's always been up over our heads all our lives, and just never knew the intricate story that was involved in that beautiful canopy of stars that we see all the time. So, Jonathan Gray, all the way from New Zealand, thank you so much for joining me here on this edition of Time Out. For Jonathan Gray, I'm, of course, Kevin Gallagher. Please tune in again next week to see what it is we'll be talking about. Till then, have a great night.